And over the last few weeks on the lineup, we've been following the weakening of the Islamic State terror group and its territory and its finances, but a lot of its power is in public support. So how do young Arab men and women see the group now? A new poll says their support is sliding. Ezra Taylor has the details.
The Islamic State militants has long been noted as one of the biggest problems facing the Western world. Now it appears the Western world is not alone in its assessment. Arab youths in the Middle East agree. According to a survey published Tuesday, young Arabs view the Islamic State as the biggest challenge facing their region. The 8th annual ASDAA Burson Marstella Arab Youth Survey 2016 was conducted by international polling firm PSB. The survey asked Arab youth in the age group of 18 to 24 years, and they asked country nationals only. The sample was split 50-50, male-female. Half the 18 to 24-year-olds surveyed said IS was the major obstacle in the region. That's 13% increase from the 37% in the poll conducted last year. Even when asked if they would support the militant group if it used less violence, 78% of respondents said no. Almost a quarter of those who answered the survey blamed high unemployment with young Arabs for Islamic State's success. In the past, Arab youth regarded Israel as the biggest issue. Now it seems their attention has shifted.
And with me now, expert on international relations and political psychology, Philippe Assouline. Good evening, Philippe.
Hi, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your show.
Thank you very much. So we have been here for weeks talking about ISIS getting weaker in terms of territory, losing ground in Syria and Iraq, losing financing, but there's a key element here of public support of ISIS propaganda, their power on the average young person who might be watching them. Is that now changing?
I believe so, and if it hasn't yet, really, it will. So the poll that was just mentioned, you always have to be wary with these polls that people are giving their real opinion, because there's very charged questions, legal implications, etc. However, I think the success of ISIS, in large part, the ideological part, is that they were claiming to actualize the end of days of Scripture. The name of their magazine is Dabik. It's a cosmic battle at the end of days in a city in Syria. Everything they were doing in their propaganda is telling people, come participate in the end of days. And they were able to establish with great speed and momentum a caliphate, which hasn't existed for 100 years, like Muhammad did with a lot of speed. So for literalist-minded Muslims, this was kind of a proof that their project was blessed. Now it's reversed. They've lost the momentum, they're losing a lot of ground, and their main asset, ideologically, the caliphate, is shrinking.
So that loss of ground in Syria and Iraq is filtering down into the people watching online, for example, contemplating if to join their cause? I
believe so. Listen, at the end of the day, every good political communication, every good propaganda manages to entangle people's sense of achievement with some political objective. If these guys feel they're going to go and die, they're going to find a rationalization also to justify not wanting to go anymore. But Pan-Arabism died the same way. Pan-Arabism was the big movement for a secular kind of caliphate uniting all Arabs, and it lost all its favor when the Pan-Arabist forces lost against Israel. Now, there's other factors that play into it too. The terrorist attacks have brought shame on ISIS, and people in the Middle East live in an honor-shame culture. They want to distance themselves.
That's an interesting point, because from the beginning, ISIS was shocking everybody with their tactics. A very advanced group in terms of social media, extremely primitive in its method of killing. Has that tide turned? Has that backfired in any way, or is it still effective at recruiting?
I think there's a difference between what they do in their caliphate and the methods they were using were, in their opinion, the methods that Islam prescribed. So beheading is not low tech, it's what they thought was supposed to be done. And then there's a difference when it's exported to cities in the Arab world, to resorts in Tunisia and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and then in Europe in a way that shames the Arab world. I think that, in conjunction with all the other elements, has had an effect in turning people away.
So speaking about their political psychology and the way that they do get recruits, maybe it's waning, but we still see attacks like in Brussels and in Paris before. We see hundreds of Europeans, of natural-born European citizens going to Syria to fight for their cause. So what is it that's grasping their attention?
So you're always going to have the hardened core and some young disaffected men who want to be heroes on the cheap by joining the Al-Qaeda side of ISIS. I'm not exactly Al-Qaeda the organization, but in the sense of carrying terror attacks in the West. It gives them a sense of valor, of self-actualization. It ties into religious narratives that they believe that give them a sense of purpose. A lot of these young men are just idle in European cities. Some of them are also very educated and successful, but there's an appeal to participate in something bigger than oneself. And if you've grown up religious or have found religion, it can be appealing. I think that's always going to be there. In fact, it could become bigger now that the caliphate part might be destroyed. I don't think that's going to go anytime soon.
Where are Arab countries in fighting this? Because there's a lot of talk all the time about the U.S.-led coalition. We have seen Saudi Arabia, for example, also this week talking about its counter-terror coalition. Are they having an effect on the fight? Are these numbers linked to that, or is it just a lot of talk?
Both. I think they're having an effect in terms of limiting the number of people who might be able to go, but even that might be a split effort. There's been a lot of bluster. But I think the Saudis, for example, were intimidated by the Russians. The Egyptians are taking care of their backyard, but they're having a difficulty in the Sinai. There hasn't been really a muscular response as much as we could see. ISIS, in a certain sense, is serving Arab purposes in terms of being a potential counterweight to Iran. And the real fight in the Middle East now is sectarian. And so in that sense, they have to choose the lesser of two enemies. There hasn't been a very, very determined effort yet. But I do think in terms of recruiting and communication inside Arab countries, there is an effect. And there's
so just very briefly, in terms of the political psychology, the strategy that IS is using, on the other hand, you have to counter it. Does Europe, does the United States, in terms of that, the propaganda, know how to counter that at all?
Excellent question. Absolutely not. There's a very big reticence to even address the ideological issue, but even more so the emotional issue behind it. We have to fight on social media, and you have to give people an alternative sense of fulfillment to compete with this one. You have to understand the emotional and cultural dynamics fueling this.
Philippe Assouline, thanks very much for this. And we're going out for a short break. 2 minutes. When we're back, we go from the Arab youth survey we're talking about now to a survey of Israeli youth. Are they veering more to the right? 2 minutes, and we'll be back.